From 1975 to 1980, the county of Yorkshire in England was cast under the shadow of a serial killer who stalked the streets at night, targeting lone women. Peter Sutcliffe, dubbed the Yorkshire Ripper by the press, would bludgeon his victims with a hammer before stabbing them to death. Claiming to be on a mission from God to rid the world of prostitutes, he would murder at least 13 women and leave a minimum of 7 women severely injured, all while evading police detection. This is the portrait of Peter Sutcliffe, also known as the Yorkshire Ripper. Hi, I'm Lostloz, an artist from Wales in the UK. In the interest of levelling up my digital art skills, I decided to create a series of digital portraits of serial killers using Procreate. In each episode, I'll talk about the life and crimes of each of the serial killers while showing you the process of completing their portrait. So, if you love art and find serial killers intriguing, get comfy. Welcome to Portrait of a Serial Killer. Before I continue, I want to give you a quick disclaimer. In this episode, I'll be talking about the following: murder, mutilation, sex work, misogyny, and mental health. As usual, I won't go into all the gory details, but this could still be upsetting for some. Please keep yourself safe and click out the video if necessary. Hope to see you in the next one. Right, let's start. Peter Sutcliffe was born on the 2nd of June 1946 in Bingley, Yorkshire. His parents, John Sutcliffe and Kathleen Coonan, were both from working class backgrounds. Kathleen was a Roman Catholic and John was a choir member at the local Anglican church. Their children were raised in the Catholic faith and Peter Sutcliffe briefly served as an altar boy. Sutcliffe's father was a domineering alcoholic adulterer who would violently and emotionally abuse his wife and children. Sutcliffe was a premature baby and grew to be a sickly child, small in stature. As a result, he was often bullied in school and was commonly seen alone during playtimes. His abusive father would also pick on him about his size and the close relationship with his mother, referring to him as a wimp, always hanging onto his mother's apron, a mummy's boy. In contrast to his father, Sutcliffe saw his mother as perfect. She was loving and provided him with the attention he needed. His opinion of his mother would change when his father caught her being unfaithful. Sutcliffe's father, who had posed as his wife's lover to catch her in the act, brought Sutcliffe and his siblings to a hotel where they witnessed their father removing a nightgown from their mother's purse. At that moment, Sutcliffe concluded that even a perfect woman couldn't be trusted. In late adolescence, Sutcliffe begins to spy on prostitutes. This obsession with voyeurism grew and followed him into his adult life. At the age of 15, Sutcliffe got a job as a gravedigger. He became familiar with corpses and later claimed to hear the voice of God from the gravestones. Colleagues remarked that he loved this job too much and would always volunteer for extra shifts washing corpses. Sutcliffe held several menial jobs following this until he became a heavy goods vehicle driver in 1976 for T&WH Clark Holdings Limited. At 16, Sutcliffe met his wife on Valentine's Day in a pub in Bradford's red light district. They were married on the 10th of August 1974. Sadly, his wife became unwell and was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. This resulted in her having violent rages and being emotionally abusive towards Sutcliffe. He would often have to pin her down to stop her outbursts. The couple were unsuccessful in having children, with all of their pregnancies resulting in miscarriages. The couple were eventually informed that they were unable to have children. When his wife was well enough, she completed her studies to become a teacher. During this time, Sutcliffe found out she was having an affair. The couple stayed together, and with the addition of her teaching salary, they bought a house at 6 Garden Lane in Heaton, Bradford, where Sutcliffe continued to live until his arrest. On the 5th of July 1975 in Keenley, a small town in Bradford, Sutcliffe attacked a 26-year-old woman, Anna Rodzilski, who had been walking alone down an alleyway when she was knocked unconscious with a hammer and stabbed with a knife. Luckily, Sutcliffe got disturbed by a neighbour and fled the scene. The traumatised victim is severely harmed and required brain surgery, but she did survive. This incident wasn't linked to the case until mid-June 1978. On the 15th of August, Sutcliffe drives his friend, Trevor Birdstall, to Halifax for some drinks. Sutcliffe ends up following 46-year-old Olive Smelt in a car. He then leaves his friend in the vehicle and follows Smelt down the alleyway. Some small talk about the weather is exchanged with Smelt before he attacks her from behind with a series of blows to the skull. He was again interrupted and ran back to his car and drove off. Smelt informed the police that her attacker had a Yorkshire accent. Unfortunately, because she isn't a prostitute, she isn't linked to the case until much later on, and the clue that the killer has a northern accent is disregarded. Sutcliffe's next victim is 14-year-old Tracy Brown in a small town in Bradford. Brown had been walking alone down a country lane. Sutcliffe had walked and talked with Brown for about a mile before attacking her from behind, delivering 5 blows to the head. Again, Sutcliffe is interrupted, this time by headlights of a passing car. He left Brown severely injured. Brown provided police with a facial composite of her attacker, but the police didn't link her to the case because of her age, the location, and the fact that she wasn't a prostitute. Sutcliffe would later confess to this attack whilst in prison. 28-year-old Wilma McCann is believed to be Sutcliffe's first murder victim. On the 30th of October 1975, Sutcliffe attacked the mother of 4 with a hammer, striking her twice on the head, and then, when on the ground, moving clothing to expose her torso before stabbing her 15 times to the neck, chest and abdominal area. She was found at 6 a.m. the following day by her milkman in Chapelstown, Leeds, on the playing fields roughly 100 yards from her home and close to the red light district. The case goes unsolved and pretty much forgotten about until the next murder. In Leeds, on the 20th of January 1976, 42-year-old Emily Jackson becomes Sutcliffe's next victim. Jackson had a family and had just started sex work to help make ends meet. She would solicit using her family's blue van, which she often parked outside the Gaiety, a pub on the border of Chapeltown's red light district. Sutcliffe had picked her up outside the pub and drove a mile to a derelict buildings in an industrial estate. Sutcliffe strikes her with a hammer 2 times and then moves her clothes to expose her torso before stabbing her 56 times in the neck, chest and abdominal area. This time, a Phillips screwdriver is used. He then posed her so her feet would be facing whoever discovered her. At some point during the murder, Sutcliffe stamps on Jackson's thigh, leaving a size 7 boot impression at the scene. On May 9th of that year, Sutcliffe targets 20-year-old cleaner Marcella Claxton in a park in Leeds. She was walking home after a party and accepted a lift from Sutcliffe. At some point, she had left the car to urinate, and it's at this point that Sutcliffe hits her with a hammer. Claxton survives this attack but was 4 months pregnant and unfortunately suffered a miscarriage. She received multiple brain surgeries and continues to suffer from blackouts and depression because of this attack. She accurately described her assailant, but the police didn't connect the attack because Marcella was black and was not a prostitute. It was only linked after Sutcliffe confessed to this attack later on. Sutcliffe murdered 28-year-old Irene Richards on February 5th, 1977. Richards was a sex worker from Chapeltown on her way to a pub in Leeds town centre. Sutcliffe had beaten her over the head with 3 hammer blows and stabbed her in the abdomen. Once dead, Sutcliffe posed her body after carrying out further mutilation with a knife. Police found tyre marks at the scene and realised that the perpetrator was picking up victims in a car. The following day, police launched a tracking inquiry to record the licence plates of vehicles frequenting Chapeltown's red light district. Police were also asked to check vehicles' tyres during routine stops to rule them out from the investigation. Only 2 months later, Sutcliffe strikes again. On April 23rd, he kills sex worker Patricia Atkinson Mitra. Sutcliffe had picked her up in Manningham, a council estate in Bradford, and the couple drove back to Atkins' flat. Once inside the flat, Sutcliffe bludgeons her over the head 4 times and pulls at her clothes, exposing her. He then stabs her 6 times in the stomach. Bloody boot prints at the scene illustrate how the killer had reposed the victim. They match the boot print found on Emily Jackson's thigh. 16-year-old shop assistant Jane MacDonald was attacked by Sutcliffe whilst walking home at 2 a.m. on the 10th of July 1977. Children discover her body in a playground in Chapeltown, but it's clear to the police that she was not killed in the playground but dragged and posed there. She had been hit on the head by a hammer and stabbed in the chest and back. Police assumed the Ripper accidentally killed MacDonald, thinking she was a sex worker. The media often call MacDonald the first innocent victim. The Ripper case becomes a national story. The police started to feel the pressure and appointed a new team lead investigator, George Oldfield, Assistant Chief Constable of the Yorkshire Police. A month later, on July 10th, Sutcliffe attacks 42-year-old Maureen Long in Bradford. She had been leaving a nightclub when Sutcliffe offered her a lift home. He drove her to a nearby waste ground, struck her on the back of the head and stabbed her several times, leaving her for dead. Long was found suffering from hypothermia and spent weeks in hospital recovering following this attack. Due to brain damage, she remembered nothing of her assailant or the attack. October 1st, 1977, Sutcliffe murdered 20-year-old Jean Jordan, a sex worker, wife and mother of two, this time in Manchester. Sutcliffe had picked her up and taken her to an allotment where he killed her with his usual hammer and knife combo. He had paid Jordan with a £5 note. Sutcliffe realised that the note could be traced and had to return to the scene 8 days later to get it, but he couldn't find it. In a rage, he stripped the body and inflicted further injuries, including an attempt at trying to decapitate the corpse. He left the body out in the open to be discovered. The body was found the following day, and police found the £5 note in Jordan's handbag in a hidden compartment. Police tracked the note to the Midland Bank in Shipley and Bingley. This was further narrowed to 8,000 employees who could have received the pound note in their pay packets. Police interviewed 5,000 employees, including Sutcliffe, who was interviewed twice but provided an alibi on both occasions. They deemed the alibis credible and moved on. In Leeds on December 14th, Sutcliffe tried to kill Marilyn Moore, a 24-year-old sex worker and mother of three, in the back of his car. However, whilst hitting Moore in the head with a hammer, Sutcliffe loses his footing. This allows Moore to escape. Tyre marks matching those found at Irene Richards' murder are discovered at the scene. Moore provided a physical description of her attacker to help create a facial composite and accurately described his car. This car had been seen in red light district areas. Sutcliffe was interviewed again as a result. January 1978, Yvonne Pearson, a 21-year-old sex worker from Bradford, was bludgeoned over the head with what was thought to be a large stone. The body wasn't found until 2 months later, in late March, when a man walking through an abandoned lot spotted her arm sticking out from a discarded sofa. The body was found exposed with a Mirror newspaper tucked under the arm dating February 21st, 1976. This, and the fact that the location where she was found was heavily used, led police to believe that the killer had returned to the body and placed the newspaper and pulled her arm out so she would be discovered. 10 days later, in Huddersfield, he kills Elma Ritka, an 18-year-old sex worker. Sutcliffe had hit her over the head 5 times as she was leaving his car. He stripped her semi-naked, pushed her top and her bra up to expose her fully, then stabbed her in the chest. Ritka carried out her sex work alongside her twin sister, Rita. They would work in tandem. Rita saw her sister get into a dark car, which she identified as a Ford, driven by a smartly dressed white man about 35 years old. She doesn't report this to the police until 3 days later because she fears she'll be charged with prostitution. Police take the sniffer dogs to where she was last seen and find her body in a nearby timber yard. West Yorkshire Police offer a reward of £10,000 for any information leading to the arrest of the Yorkshire Ripper. Vera Millward, a 40-year-old sex worker, left her home at 10 p.m. on the 16th of May. Sutcliffe picked her up in his car and drove her to the Manchester infirmary, where he attacked her. 2 gardeners discovered her the following day. Her body had been dragged out from the bushes into the open to ensure she would be found. Matching boot prints and tyre marks are located at the scene. Police begin to tell women to stay at home at night and not to travel alone in the day. 3 letters from an individual claiming to be Jack were sent to George Oldfield, the lead investigator on the case, around this time. One of the letters correctly referred to Vera Millward and her recent visits to the infirmary. DNA evidence from the saliva on the letter seal came from a B secretor, a blood group comprising of 6% of the population. Police narrow suspects based on blood group and show the public the handwriting to see if anybody recognises it. Sutcliffe would kill again at the beginning of April 1979, this time in Halifax, a more well-to-do area than his previous haunts. His victim was 19-year-old bank clerk Josephine Whitaker. She'd been attacked as she walked home alone. She was found on the playing fields 5 minutes from her home by a woman waiting for the bus. She'd been hit twice in the head with a hammer and then stabbed 25 times in the breast, abdomen, vagina and thigh area. Her body had also been exposed. On June 17, 1979, George Oldfield received another envelope containing a cassette tape this time. The cassette held a recorded message that said, "I am Jack. I see you're having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George, but Lord, you're no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started." The man claiming to be the Ripper had a Wearside accent. Police had already received 3 letters bearing the same postmark and claimed to be Jack, a nod to the infamous serial killer Jack the Ripper. This led police to play this tape to the media and rule out any suspects that didn't have a Wearside accent. An agent from America's FBI Behavioural Analysis Unit provided a preliminary profile on the Ripper and advised police that the tape and letters were likely a hoax. Police ignored this advice and doubled down on the lead, ploughing thousands of police hours into finding what would soon be known as Wearside Jack. 13th of August 1978. Sutcliffe is interviewed again as his car has been cited multiple times at all of the red light districts. Sutcliffe denies attending these areas and soliciting prostitutes. No arrest is made. On the 1st of September, Sutcliffe murders Barbara Leach, a 20-year-old student at Bradford University. A patrolling policeman found her body the next day. Her body was found under a discarded carpet weighted down with bricks. The police officer had noticed her boot sticking out from underneath. She was about 5 minutes away from her university lodgings. The recent victims of the Ripper were not prostitutes. This shocked the public and grabbed their attention. Most women no longer felt safe. The government started questioning the slow progress of the police. In response, the police launched Project R, the first of its kind. The campaign focuses on the leads provided by the letters and the tape recording, the handwriting and the Wearside accent. Sutcliffe was arrested for drunk driving in April 1980. He killed 47-year-old civil servant Margarita Walls on the evening of August 20th while awaiting trial. Walls had left her office and was walking home. Sutcliffe hit her with his hammer to the back of the head. He then tied a rope around her neck and dragged her 20 yards into a high-walled garden. He choked her to death, then removed all of her clothes except her tights. He covered her remains with grass before leaving the scene. On October 25th, 1980, a 21-year-old art student at Leeds University, Maureen Lee, became Sutcliffe's next victim. Sutcliffe had called out to her as she hurried down a dark street to catch the bus home. And because he had a Yorkshire accent, Lee slowed her pace to see if she knew him. She didn't. She continued to walk away. Sutcliffe caught up with her and struck her on the back of the head with a hammer. Lee awoke in hospital with significant injuries, including multiple fractures to her head and face. A 20-year-old Jacqueline Hill, a student at Leeds University, was murdered on November the 5th. She was returning home to her student hall of residence in Headley, Leeds. Sutcliffe delivered a blow to her head before removing her clothes and stabbing her repeatedly in the chest and once in the eye with a screwdriver. She was killed near a bus stop about 100 yards from her house, yet police took 10 hours to find the body. The public are outraged. At this stage, the police continue to advise that all women were in danger and should stay at home at night and avoid travelling alone during the day. This sparked outrage from women all over Britain who felt that their freedoms were being chipped away because of a man's actions. The search for the Yorkshire Ripper spanned just over 5 years and was one of the most extensive and expensive in British history. This case was complex and posed several problems for the police. Firstly, the attitude towards sex workers and repeated victim blaming significantly hindered the investigation. In October 1979, a senior West Yorkshire detective gave the following statement to the press regarding the perpetrator. He has made it clear that he hates prostitutes. Many people do. We, as a police force, will continue to arrest prostitutes, but the Ripper is now killing innocent girls. That indicates your mental state and that you are in urgent need of medical attention. You have made your point. Give yourself up before another innocent woman dies. Society's attitude towards sex workers and sexually liberated women meant that initially there wasn't much news coverage or attention given to the murders. The killing of prostitutes wasn't considered particularly newsworthy or significant. Many of the victims of Sutcliffe, and sex workers in general, were often victim blamed and believed to be responsible for their attacks. They weren't viewed as credible witnesses and were often treated poorly during police questioning. This alienated sex workers and survivors from talking to the police and helping them with the investigation. For the first 4 years of this investigation, police failed to link all of Sutcliffe's murders and surviving victims because they weren't sex workers. Several of these surviving victims had provided detailed descriptions of Sutcliffe's appearance. Another had said that her attacker had a Yorkshire accent. If these links had been made and the survivors believed, police would have caught Sutcliffe sooner. Secondly, the misdirection caused by the tapes and letters George Oldfield received. The FBI were right. The tape recording and letters were a hoax. Unfortunately, the £1 million Project R campaign was launched regardless. The project involved multilingual roadshows that toured the country's pubs, factories, shopping and town centres, showing the public examples of the handwriting from the letters and playing them the tape. Over 2 million copies of a 4-page newspaper profiling each known victim was handed out. Radio and TV broadcasted the Wearside Jack tape several times a day, hoping someone would recognise the voice. 6,000 billboards were put up to encourage the public to be vigilant and report any suspicion to the police. This meant that the investigation was not only derailed by a hoax, but was actively spreading misinformation to the public. This allowed Sutcliffe to be ruled out of the suspect pool and to continue killing with little to no suspicion because he had a Yorkshire accent. It would turn out that John Samuel Humble, an unemployed alcoholic who lived on an estate just a few miles from Castletown, was responsible all along. The DNA left on the envelopes would be matched to the DNA taken in 2001 following a drunken disorderly offence. Humble was convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Finally, investigations at this time were largely paper-based, making it extremely difficult to organise information on a case this size practically. Important leads were getting lost or missed in the ever-mounting paperwork that eventually required the floor in the incident room to be reinforced due to its weight. 18,000 calls were taken in the first 6 weeks of the campaign, flooding the police with more information than they could feasibly handle. Around 17,000 suspects had been investigated and ruled out by mid-November. On November 25, 1980, Trevor Birdstall, a friend of Sutcliffe, had anonymously written a letter to the police providing Sutcliffe's name and address, stating, "I have good reason to know the man you were looking for in the Ripper case. The man has dealings with prostitutes and always had a thing about them." The letter was marked Priority Number 1. An index card was created based on the letter, and a police officer found Sutcliffe already had 3 existing index cards in his records, paperwork of which remained in a filing tray not yet processed. Birstall also visited Bradford Police Station the day after sending the letter to repeat his suspicions about Sutcliffe. He told the police that on August 15, 1975, he'd witnessed Sutcliffe pursue a woman in Halifax, the date and place of the olive smelt attack. Sutcliffe had been questioned and ruled out on 9 separate occasions before his eventual arrest on January 2nd, 1981. By this time, he had carried out at least 13 murders and a minimum of 7 attempted murders. Police had accosted him by chance. A routine stop and search found that he had a sex worker inside his car and that his vehicle had false number plates. Sutcliffe was held in custody because the arresting officer noticed he looked like the facial composite of the Ripper that he'd seen on the police station wall. On a hunch, the arresting officer returned to the arrest site to see if he could find some more evidence. He discovered a knife and a hammer. After this, Sutcliffe admits his guilt and provides a voluntary statement that outlines each of the crimes in detail: where they took place, the weapons he used, where he left the bodies, and how he selected his victims. He was charged with 13 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. At his trial, Sutcliffe pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. As a defence, he claimed that he heard the voice of God that commanded him to kill prostitutes. He had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia by 3 separate psychologists following his arrest. The judge did not accept this plea, and a trial was arranged to start on May 5, 1981. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Sutcliffe was found guilty on all counts and received 20 concurrent sentences of life imprisonment. On the 16th of July 2010, the High Court issued Sutcliffe with a whole life tariff, meaning he would never be released. Sutcliffe contracted COVID-19 and died aged 74 on the 13th of November 2022 in a hospital bed at the University Hospital of North Durham. This case held a mirror up to society's deep-rooted misogyny. It illustrated the disparities between men and women and highlighted the country's disdain for sex workers, a prejudice that saw vulnerable women who were just trying to survive being murdered in cold blood. Their deaths received relatively little attention or concern from society. The attention they did get was often in the form of victim blaming, leading to them and their families being ridiculed by the media and ostracised by the public. There has been definite progress made in modern day society regarding equality of the sexes and perceptions of gender norms. I'd like to think that a killer like Sutcliffe would now be identified way before his attacks became deadly. It's cases like this that highlight the importance of feminism and for people to challenge things like toxic masculinity in order for both men and women to feel safe in our society. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, so feel free to put them in the comments. That's all I've got for this case, so I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. If you got something from this episode, please consider giving it a like. If you want to see more episodes, make sure you click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything. I'll see you in the next one.